Hello, subscribers. Today we go back to Timmy.
Timmy!
In his video called Apologist Doesn't Understand How Time Works, the thumbnail makes it clear he's going after Braxton Hunter. So the first thing that comes to my mind is the difference between A theory and B theory. But that doesn't seem like something he could just disagree with so easily. So I'm guessing it's gonna be another atheist claiming that the concept of before time is nonsensical. Well, let's get to it.
Here's a guy who tried to rebut one of my videos about the philosophy of time and failed.
Oh, a rebuttal. Nice.
We're going to respond to this business about time in just a moment, but what John is bringing is kind of a contingency argument. We've not really gotten to that part yet, but he's pointing out that everything, all these things that he's mentioning, everything that you see around you owes its existence to something else. So there must be a necessary being that serves as the explanation for the existence of all of these contingent things.
The contingency argument is a form of the infinite regress argument that assumes that there is some problem with time stretching backward infinitely. Bertrand Russell pointed out one problem with this argument, which is that there is not actually any problem with an infinite regress, because there's no logical problem with a series that has no first term. There is, in fact, no reason that there can't be an infinite regress. I don't believe that there was an infinite regress, however, because it looks as though time only goes back to the Big Bang.
Did anybody else lose a little more respect for Bertrand Russell there? Assuming, of course, that he actually said that, which I have no reason to think he didn't. But there are some pretty glaring problems with infinite regress, and they are best exemplified in the Grim Reaper paradox, which proves that an infinite regress is more than just hard to fathom. It's actually a logical contradiction. At least Timmy recognizes that time had a beginning, but this does not bode well for him.
But it also hints at a recession of causal events, or a regression of causal events. As we look backwards, the things that we see around us exist because of something else that came before them.
Time doesn't. Obviously, nothing came before time itself.
Bingo called it. He wants to assume that the only way we can mean before is in temporal terms, rather than logical terms.
From a very young age, we understand the causal relationships between things, and that things that begin to happen or exist owe that happening or that existence to something else.
We infer that, but as David Hume pointed out, we can never actually prove that to be the case. Immanuel Kant inferred that we naturally make these inferences because they help us navigate reality, but that causation is effectively all in our heads and not something that we observe in nature.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
Not something we observe in nature. Are you kidding? I'm observing myself because words to appear on my screen as we speak. Even if we were to grant that causation wasn't real, that would just kill the intelligibility of the universe. We could never know anything, because as far as we know, it could just all be in our heads. Talk about a foundation of loose sand.
That either came temporally or logically prior to that thing happening that we're trying to understand something about.
This guy seems to think that logical priority is a form of causation. It isn't. Logical priority is when an attribute is a defining characteristic of a state. For example, you have to be single to be a bachelor. Being single doesn't cause you to be a bachelor, it defines your bachelorhood.
First off, I don't know if I said this before, but it annoys me that Timmy can't seem to use Braxton's name. If you know the name of the person, or the name of their channel, saying this guy just seems rude. Second, he says that logical priority is not a form of causation. But like duh, neither is temporal priority. Priority of any kind is not a form of causation, it's a requirement for causation. Third, yes, you logically have to be single in order to be a bachelor, but in order for time to be created, something must logically create it. That thing will be logically prior to time.
I don't believe that the fundamental ingredients of this stuff came from anywhere. To say that it came from somewhere implies that there was a time when those fundamental ingredients did not exist, a time when they weren't yet in existence. There was no such time. The fundamental ingredients of everything we see around us have existed for as long as time has existed. I don't believe that the universe came from anywhere any more than you believe that God came from anywhere.
You already agreed that time had a beginning. We both agree that everything we can see has existed for as long as time existed. But for something to begin to exist, it must have a cause. If you want to be at all rational, you must accept this basic logical principle.
And that is a very simple and even simplistic, but also incredibly profound idea. and you can talk about it in a high level, academic level with intellectual jargon, or you can talk about it on the level of a 6-year-old and say, what serves as the explanation for everything that I see around me? So God is the best explanation for that.
And then you can make a special pleading argument that God is the one and only thing whose existence is self-explanatory.
That's not special pleading. If you have good reason to think that someone or something created God, then go ahead and present your evidence. There must logically be a first cause, and that first cause must logically be uncaused in order to be the first. And you already admitted that the universe had a beginning, so that can't be first.
The fact that there was never a time on that timeline when time did not exist doesn't mean there wasn't some kind of existence sans the timeline.
That's literally exactly what it means. If we're talking about time per se, and not just any particular timeline, there, by definition, cannot be existence independent of any and all time. To exist means to have location in space-time. Location in space-time is logically prior to existence. A timeless and spaceless entity is therefore a contradiction in terms. I'm sure apologists use a different definition of existence, but they've never been able to explain to me what it is. What does it mean to exist? What does it mean to be part of reality if it doesn't necessarily mean existing at any place or at any time? What does it mean to say that something can exist without existing anywhere ever? How is that not an obvious contradiction?
This is funny coming from someone who claims causation may not exist. The irony is just palpable. Location in space-time is not logically prior to existence. It's only logically prior to existence in space-time. Actually, wait. No, location cannot be logically prior to existence at all. Existence is logically prior to just about everything except being caused. In order to say something has a location, it must first exist. And what dictionary are you using to get your definition of exist? Mine says, 1. To have actual being, be real. 2. To have life, live. 3. To occur. Nothing in there about having a location in space-time. Timmy is so dead set on rejecting the supernatural that he throws logic out with it.
You can't create anything without any time in which to carry out the act of creation. For that reason, time could not have been created.
Okay, now this is simply a misunderstanding because you could say very simply that the act of creation by God was the very first moment of time.
Well, you can't create something at a time when it already exists. By then, it's too late to create it. The act of creating time, therefore, cannot have been at the very first moment of time, because even by the very earliest moment of time, time already existed, and it was therefore too late to create it.
Wow, that one just went right over your head, didn't it? The first moment of creation wasn't just at the first moment of time. It was the first moment of time, which again, you admitted time had a first moment.
In fact, that's how we talk about it. That's how we think of it. So you would have, and by the way, the thing that gets you to that is agent causation. So we have different types of causation. We have event causation, like if I threw a book through a window and it broke the window, that's an event that led to another event happening.
In philosophy, the technical term for that kind of causation is actually efficient causation.
We have state causation. That's like if you have a podium and there is a book sitting on top of the podium, the state of the podium is causing the state of the book to be suspended in the air, or as some people like to think about it, a frozen pond with a log resting on top of it. The state of the frozen pond is leading to the state of the log resting on it.
That's not really meaningfully different from efficient causation, because the interaction that keeps one book from falling through the podium or the log from falling through the ice is the electromagnetic force, which does not propagate instantaneously. Therefore, these are also events causing other events.
No, I think you're just being contrarian now. You're trying really hard to not agree or find new ways to disagree. But you never even explained what events you're referring to. How is a log being motionless an event?
So you have state causation, but then you have state event causation. That's when a state leads to an event, and the way that you get there is personal agent causation. So if you want a good illustration for that, just imagine a man sitting, he's in a state, and then he stands up. He went from the state of sitting to standing up.
If a guy stands up, that too is the result of neurological events, not states.
His sitting was the state, and I can see now why you were so desperate to disagree with state-state causation. You had to, in order to disagree with the next causations.
Now, if we were to compress a stopwatch at the moment that he moved to stand up, well, then that would be the beginning of the timeline of his movement, and the timeline would begin and the movement would begin. So you would have this state leading to an event. Well, how could that happen? Well, it could happen with a mind.
And a mind is a process carried out by the brain. This, too, is a form of efficient causation, or event-event causation, as this guy likes to call it.
Careful. You're treading dangerously close to saying you don't have free will. Also, if you're calling all forms of causation efficient causation, then what's the point of calling it efficient instead of just calling it causation and saying there is only one form? On the one hand, it's kind of nice being able to refute someone who ties himself in so many knots that I can just skate through easily. On the other hand, it's kind of sad seeing someone be just so irrational.
And later on in this video, he's going to say something like, well, this doesn't, even if I granted you all this, doesn't give you a personal creator. It does if you understand these different types of causation. That would be personal agent causation. Now, because someone would have to make the movement to move from a state to an event, especially from a state of timeless nothingness.
Timeless nothingness is not a state. It is literally the absence of any state of any kind. Apologists love to argue that the creator of the universe must be a person because only a person is capable of making decisions, which are events that occur without any prior cause. There are two things wrong with this. One is that decisions do not occur without prior cause. There is no evidence at all that anything that goes on in the brain that is in any way related to decision-making is not entirely causally determined. So persons are not capable of uncaused acts. The other problem is that there are, in fact, non-personal physical events which are uncaused. Not every physical event is deterministic. So the idea that persons are the only entities capable of uncaused acts is the opposite of true. Persons are not capable of this, but there are non-personal physical phenomena which are.
Such as, it's funny that he couldn't give a single example of a non-personal physical event that is uncaused. Heck, forget non-personal and physical, just give me any event that is uncaused. I'll wait. Also, timeless nothingness is indeed a state. A state is not a physical thing, it's more like a descriptor.
Okay, now you notice again, like he's got one criticism that he thinks undermines all of this. That one criticism is that you already have to have time in order for time to come into existence. But this, because what he's thinking, what I can only imagine he's thinking of, is for whatever it is, God or anything else, to cause time to come into existence, that act of causation or thinking through when to cause, or if there's something other than God, that movement or explosion or whatever it is that causes time to exist would have to have time in order for it to function. But of course, as we've seen already, that would not be true of a spaceless, timeless, non-material, sufficiently powerful mind that is omniscient.
That's a long list of mutually contradictory attributes. A mind, by definition, is a process. Processes need time to occur. Consciousness requires time because consciousness consists of thinking, feeling, perceiving, etc. Without these events occurring, consciousness does not occur. A timeless being therefore cannot be conscious, and if it cannot be conscious, how can it be a mind? However, even if the mind were an entity rather than a process, it would still need time to exist. To say that something can exist independent of space and time is to say that it can exist without existing anywhere ever. That's a clear contradiction. And even if there's such a thing as instantaneous causation, it still makes no sense to say that time was instantaneously caused to exist at its first moment, because by the first moment of a thing's existence, it's already too late to create it, even instantaneously, because it already exists at its first moment.
Those attributes are not contradictory in the slightest, and a mind is not a process. A mind produces processes. There is a difference. Consciousness does not require time because, and I'll use your list, God does not need to think because he's omniscient, so all his thoughts are just there. He already has all the answers, so there is nothing to think about. Before time, there is nothing to have any feelings about, so he just knows how he feels about certain subjects, but he does not actually feel them until after time began. Same with perceiving. Before time, there is just nothing to perceive. In fact, the very act of thinking or attempting to perceive could theoretically create the universe. I mean, if I was thrown back to before time began, then my thoughts would immediately start a universe, because any action that would otherwise require time would create time in order to happen. That doesn't mean I could do anything with it, or that a universe created from my mind would have any matter, but I think there's something to that. And then he ends by going back to his same poor definition of existing and reiterates his misunderstanding of first moment causation. Something cannot already exist at its first moment. It can exist at its first moment, of course, but it cannot already exist. Saying it already existed at its first moment implies it existed before its first moment. Well, that was an easy one. Timmy really needs to go back to the drawing board. Timmy!